Thank you for joining us on the show today. We are leaning very heavy on the budget expectations, a bit of what we expect, and we get two interesting views, if you'd like, from the Minister of Health. The Ministry of Health, as well as the health sector, has been hit hard by COVID-19, both on the end of, production, the personnel. How will they need their monies put in place from the 2022 national budget? And the Green Economy Ministry is a new one, but climate change cuts across all sectors. What do they need to do in terms of these monies getting to the right positions? We get reactions from these two ministers, and we also get into the issue of infrastructure. The infrastructure policy, the Infrastructure Act 2022, what is that all about? And social housing in our country, what does that look like? Milupi downloads and just tells us more about that one. We also take real estate in Zambia. What does it look like? And of course, CEO of one of the entities in real estate says that one of the challenges has to do with utility service offerings. This and more on Strictly Business. Thank you for your company. This is Strictly Business. My name is JudyNgulube. First up, we want to talk about the 2022 national budget. And this time we're going to be getting some analysis, some expectations from an entity that is very inclined and has got a lot to do with the preparations that have been going on from what you're going to see on Friday as we offload the 2022 national budget for Zambia. I am joined by Michael Phiri. I want to understand how exactly, from the side of his entity, they're involved in the national budget making process. How are you?
I'm good, Judy, and how are you?
I'm fine. The countdown to Friday is on, isn't it?
Yes.
You must be having a very busy week.
You can say that again. We're very cautiously optimistic.
But tell us about the process. How has it been? I know you've been heavily involved in this one.
Well, the way the government formulates the budget, they begin to receive submissions from as early as end of March, early April, and then those submissions inform what they come up with in the budget ultimately. First, they prepare a paper, a medium-term expenditure framework, and then that then informs what goes into the budget. And so this process starts very early in the year. And by the time the minister is presenting the budget, there would have been several consultations going on from April right through to the last Friday of September in a normal year as it would be.
That's from almost the first quarter all the way to the last quarter.
Indeed.
Stakeholder collaboration, involvement, who I know you can't mention everybody from the top of your head, but the ones you can remember?
Indeed, because this is a consultative process. So you have the Zambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ZICA, as one of the people that are consulted, the manufacturers, they are consulted, the farmers, they are consulted, the tourism agency, they are also consulted, and they are allowed to make submissions. So once you make the submissions, and if the ministry wants clarification on some of what you've asked for, then they invite you to go into their offices and have meetings, and that engagement is ongoing. We like the engagement because then it minimizes the friction that would otherwise characterize a budget process.
But the big one is tax. Tax on services, tax on goods. Let's start with the PAYE, the pay as you earn, all the way through to issues of taxations on sectors and industries such as mining. So let's start with the PAYE, then we get to those.
Indeed. So pay as you earn is particularly of interest to the voters and to the working class this year, because as you know, the way the budget process has worked, it has been heavily supported by pay as you earn. About 50% of the income taxes contribution has been through the pay as you earn system. And so with COVID, with individual debt problems as well, not just the national problems, people are looking for a form of relief by way of maybe increased exemption on pay as you earn, exempt income being increased from the current 4,000 to something a bit higher. And also they are looking at maybe the top line, the 37.5, dropping down a bit, because the standard corporate tax rate is 35%, but individuals who are employed end up paying as much as 37.5%. And so there is optimism that the government will look at that area as well.
Do you think the worker will be smiling?
We do hope so. Like I said, we are cautiously
fingers crossed
optimistic. Yeah, indeed. But budgeting is a balancing act. So you have the revenue side and you have the expenditure side. And so depending on how much appetite the minister will have to balance that, we'll see some relief being given to the employees.
But someone would, actually wonder to what extent, if pay as you earn is actually worked on a certain amount, if the worker is happy, is smiling, what impact would it have on the economy? Would it just be on the individual expenditure, or will have a ripple effect onto country revenue?
You know, the way pay as you earn works and employed individuals, the way they run their affairs in Zambia, most of the employed individuals would be taken care of several other people. So from a social perspective, you can expect that there will be a little more intervention if people have a bit more disposable income to spend on school fees for the more impoverished relatives, and most of the working people will be supporting on average 5 other individuals apart from their own family. And so giving them a relief becomes very pertinent in helping them to help the government in terms of provide some social amenities, social impact on the lives of various individuals. Otherwise, if the employees are not supporting their families, then the social cash transfer would be the one that is burdened with a higher demand for people who are looking for just support from the government through the social cash transfer. Let me
shift your attention to the mining industry and something that's also huge, which is the manufacturing sector, because there's been a lot of talk in regards to local products, how to improve those, but how much is going to be going to there. So there's these two, the mining sector and the manufacturing.
I like your question, Judy. Let me explain. Mining has been the cornerstone of our economy. And for a long time, we've been wanting to diversify from mining.
But it had a lot of activity recently, shifting ownership hands.
And I can tell you that in terms of our foreign exchange, 70% of it, if not more, comes from the mining sector. And I can tell you that during the COVID period, with the copper price going up, mining played a pivotal role in the way the government was able to generate the revenues. I can tell you as a matter of fact, the contribution from mining was relatively significant, both in terms of corporate tax as well as the support industries and the pay-as-you-earn that goes with the mining sector.
So regardless of the shift in hands in terms of ownership, we still want some chunk going there.
Indeed. So I was going to touch on the aspect of manufacturing and, as a way of diversifying. I think what we need is to add value to the mining products. And, they talk now about giving the mining licenses to maybe Zambians so that for some minerals like gold, for example, if it's given to the Zambians, then that will go a long way. If they can refine, they can process some of the gold and some of the minerals, it will help with the industrialization that we want to achieve. So if manganese, for example, which is a big thing, is also processed further and into some finished product of some sort, that will become very beneficial for the Zambian economy as a way of diversifying from mining, as the case may be.
When you talk about mining and how it's meshing with the manufacturing industry, so ideal. These are some of the things that we've heard a lot of scholars talking about that would not only help the industry, but also in regards to what Zambia looks like out there, investment-wise, fiscal-wise, debt-paying back-wise. Talking about that, where are we with our debts?
There's a lot of interest in Zambia by many. The inquiries that we've been receiving from international companies wanting to come and invest in Zambia has heightened since the new government came into power, which is a positive thing, because that foreign direct investment, when it comes, it helps with the exchange rate, availability of the dollar. The exchange rate goes down, your ability as Zambia to be able to pay your debt is enhanced, because if the exchange rate is higher, you will need more kwacha in order for you to pay the dollar debts that we have. And so if the exchange rate goes down, then the amount of kwacha that you'll be requiring to service the same amount of debt is sort of, I can tell you, with the exchange rate, the gain that we had, for example, the school fees that we pay for our children in university, we made a gain of 30,000 kwacha on school fees alone. And you can imagine on a national level, if I, an individual, can gain from the movement of the exchange rates to the extent of 30,000 kwacha, what more for the government when it's paying its debt if the exchange rate goes down? And so foreign direct investment helps to bring in more dollar, which lowers, it's a demand and supply issue, which lowers the exchange rate, inevitably leads to lowering the exchange rate. And so those investments by the international community are very much welcome, and we can see a lot of interest.
You know, when you say all those things, it takes me to the issue of what impact then would, you know, these investors, the investment have when it comes to via donor aid, the well-wishers, because, you know, the 7th Republican president has been talking about this, but what impact will it have on our country when it comes to just making it grow the economy, get the target of our economic growth targets to one figure, the GDPs, the inflations? Because there's been this conversation of the UPND government has come through and they've got a box that's not full. It's not empty, it's empty. How do they work with it to pay the debt, to make sure that the economic growth targets are met?
Indeed, and I like your questioning, because what is being created here is an opportunity for Zambia to be able to revive its economy. As you can imagine, that they've said that the budget, almost 90% of it would go to personal emoluments and debt servicing. And so they talk about debt rationalization, debt restructuring, really just helps to provide a little more money that can be used in the domestic economy for the various government projects. And so if instead of 50% goes into salaries and 40% into debt, and you end up paying only 20% of your debt, it allows 30% to be spent overall on the Zambian economy, on the my poor grandmother in the village and aunties and uncles, as it were. And so this whole debt restructuring talk is intended to be able to give a bit of breathing space to the government, to allow it to be able to address most of these social factors and all these needs that the government needs, including infrastructure needs that we have, and addressing the many challenges, educational, employment, and one of the key things we'll be looking at as ZICA in the budget is hopefully that in this particular budget, the minister will set targets on the sort of employment levels that will be created as a result of the policies that they will put in place. So apart from measuring the GDP growth, apart from looking at the exchange rate, the inflation, we also want to be measuring how much employment is being created in the Zambian economy year on year. You
know, this conversation, it's quite interesting. And I know you've got stakeholder engagements that you need to do before Friday. You want to meet a deadline, so I'll let you go for now.
You can say that again.
Post-budget.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, sure.
Appreciate it.
We'll certainly see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Michael Phiri, there we have been talking the expectations for the budget that is going to come through on Friday, tax-related PAYE, and obviously the ordinary person as well, not moving very far from the ripple effects of what this huge document for our country is going to actually just pan out. Now, talking about expectations, there's been a ministry that's been created which is looking at issues of climate change. Now, this cuts across all sectors. Collins Nzovu has got a huge task when it comes to this. I caught up with him to want to understand some of the expectations that he has for the 2022 national budget. Another sector of Zambia that was hit very hard by COVID-19 was the health ministry. What are they expecting? How much? And what are they looking at when it comes to 2022 national budget? I spoke to the two ministers.
My expectations are that there will be an increase in the health budget. And with that increase in the health budget, I expect that I'll be able to employ more health workers across the sector. So that excites me because I'll be able to get more people in the hospital to be able to attend to the patients. But besides that, I think that we also have internal issues within, even for those that are already employed. Again, there's a component to address that. And of course, the issue of the drug budget this new budget will come with it the creation of a drug fund, so that we have resources that are specifically earmarked for the purchase of drugs, so that we don't have this story of no drugs in Chongwe, no drugs in Kasama, no drugs in Mansa, no drugs in Choma, because now we shall have a fund dedicated to the procurement of medicines and medical supplies. So I'm quite excited about it, and also it is our first budget as UPND.
The cohesion in the ministry. You may ask, what's the connection with the Ministry of Health? When there's a flood, waterborne diseases increase. We need adaptation measures. When there's a flood, there are a lot of bridges which are damaged. When there's a drought, there's hunger. We are working very closely with the Vice President's Office through DMMU. We are working across the sectors. It's one budget, remember. But we also are advising the various ministries on what to put in there to further gain.
I've asked my ministry to look at specific designs that can be shared throughout, so that if you're building a house in the village, look at this.
This is Strictly Business. We get to talk to, in our corporate segment, we talk to the Horizon Properties CEO. We're trying to understand what the landscape for the real estate in Zambia is all about. We want to know what it's like on the real estate business. We want to understand how futuristic, and of course, he also, in our conversation, spoke of the issues of sustainable development in real estate, in infrastructure, and quite futuristic as well, because Horizon Properties is looking at going green. And in going green, he actually breaks down for me what they're doing to make sure that their houses, their infrastructure, their buildings are on par or on point with making sure that it's not only looking to the future, but looking to the future with sustainable development in mind, where now they're going to make sure that the materials being used, some of the inventions and interventions that are being infused in these structures, in these houses, is quite green as well as futuristic. But he says the biggest challenge is the utility offerings, the services that you need to light up, energy, and all those issues. Let's just get to hear what he told me.
The real estate infrastructure market, if you talk about development, I'll talk about development. There's no systematic way of developing the country in terms of infrastructure, housing. No. Developers just develop without a plan, and a number of them they develop in illegalities without approvals. So you find that the challenge is service provision. Because the challenge we have as developers is service provision. So if there's no service provision, the housing sector and the land market cannot grow. So we are grappling with the issues of services. How do we provide water? How do we provide sewer management? How do we power renewable energy? So those are the challenges we have in the market to develop the country. The word green comes from the real estate concept of social and development and environmental impact on development. So if you incorporate social and the environment, then what you are producing is a green product. Because the environment and the social is us, the human being. So the friendly environment, the friendly coexistence of the environment and the human being creates what we call green. That's why the name Green Village comes from.
All right. Yeah. So what are some of the aspects of the infrastructure, the aspects of the housing and building that will have that green aspect? Is it all about the trees, or maybe there's a special type of materials that are being used, if any?
The green is also related to sustainability. Sustainable development is where you're constructing and at the same time you're taking care of the environment. So one of the aspects here of sustainable development is, first of all, the houses are going to be using solar geysers. The electrical geysers we have installed, they are just for emergency. in case the intensity of the sun can't heat up, then you can use it, but once in a while. So in that one, it's a way of reducing energy. This is to renewable energy using solar heaters. In terms of keeping the environment, protect the environment, we are not discharging fecal matter, fecal effluent into the environment. We have a system, the biodigester system technology, which we are using, which will be taking water back to the ground.
Talking about real estate minus infrastructure on a general basis when it comes to Zambia would kind of be pointless. So we did also catch up with Charles Milupi, who is the Minister of Infrastructure. But with him, we concentrated on the issue of the Infrastructure Policy 2022, the act that is it winding up or trying to get into form, and see how this will impact the infrastructure sector in Zambia, the housing sector in Zambia. And talking about housing, he also touched on the issue of social housing. How is the middle income and the so-called poorer income bracket managing to just get housing and a roof over their head? He told us this.
There are many initiatives that this government is coming up with. Some of them they announced at the budget next Friday to free up the private sector to get involved, to free up the economy, to lower the cost of doing business. And we are determined as a government to ensure that these things are, whether it is legislation that is required, whether it is just a change of mindset, we will encourage that. Because at the moment, to get a license to do one thing, you probably need so many licenses. Various ministries and government organizations will be working to reduce these things. So
any plans for social housing in those initiatives you're talking about?
This is what I talked about. This is what I talked about, because I say this is private sector, and if you listened to the chief executive, the target is the medium income type of housing. I've said we should go beyond that. I'm not asking them, but I'm saying as a country, we should now look at social housing, which we are calling social housing. And we should not leave behind villagers. You yourself know, I don't know, I think you are probably born here in town, so you're not aware of what I'm talking about. In many of our places, a housing structure is a pole there, a pole there, a pole there, and in certain cases just grass bound around it with a very bad roof. Children are being born there. They're growing there. They're going to school there. There will come a stage in their life when they will probably be competing with someone who was born in Germany, who went through preschool, proper housing, and so on. Okay. We, as a society, we are disadvantaging the children that we produce in this country. And part of addressing those issues is to ensure that there is decent housing. I've asked my ministry to look at specific designs that can be shared throughout, so that if you're building a house in the village, look at this and put it out.
Housing, infrastructure, real estate, the budget expectations from various people who've been involved and who are carrying various ministries is what we've been talking about on Strictly Business today. Join me again next week at the same time for more business information. On behalf of the entire production crew, we appreciate your company.